April 6th, 2020. I'm going stir crazy. Graham seems to get stronger every day somehow. It's like she's stealing my youth and thriving in isolation. This may end up being a record of me going insane with her stories mixed in. Let's go sit out on the porch. It's a nice day out. I'm tired of being cooped up in here. I concede that I could use some fresh air, but make her promise not to go near the neighbors or anybody walking by on the street. She gives me an entirely too sarcastic scout salute and swears she won't. All right, that's better. Feel my battery recharging already. Now, the moon church was what I was telling you about yesterday, right? That was some crazy shit. So, Apollo 17 found this crazy structure that was just perfectly built. Strangest architecture I've ever seen. Made no goddamn sense to anyone how it remained standing after all this time. So, we trained some other crews to go up after and look into it further. Specifically, we got a few people trained that had degrees in anthropology and ancient cultures. Maybe we could find some links here between this and things that had been found on Earth. Well, naturally, nothing is ever that easy. They head up there in 1973, land smack next to the structure found by the previous mission, and get to it. By this point, technology has thankfully improved, so we have cameras in their helmets that allow us to see everything they see. They were in color too, thank God. I asked her how they had this kind of tech in '73, when a lot of things were still incredibly basic with video, especially transmitted over that vast of a distance. Pfft. You really think the stuff you saw from that time was the most advanced technology being used by the government? Don't underestimate the amount of money American government will throw at something if they feel it's a threat. The cameras and equipment we had on those missions was on par with that little video camera your mama gave me for Christmas a few years back. She's talking about the GoPro she got 4 years ago. That records in 4K. What the fuck? Now she's laughing at me again. Like I said, don't underestimate government spending. So anyway, Apollo 18 was a 3-man crew. Jason Voss, Ben Codd and Arthur Wayne. Wasn't too happy about Arthur going up there. We had spent a few months together while he was training down at Cape Canaveral. God, if he could do half the things he could do in our gravity up there. So, they got to work. Jason stayed in orbit around the moon, making sure everything on the main ship was fine. Arthur and Ben went down to the surface and set up base camp. There was the structure, and not even 100 feet away was their little landing pod set up with everything in it. They were equipped for 3 days on the moon. First day goes off fine, just walking around the thing, taking measurements and samples. They determined that most of the structure is made from an unknown element. To this day, I don't think they found out what it is. So, end of day 1, and they go back to their base camp. Now, we have a couple of cameras set up in the pod so we can see everything going on, just in case there's any issues technically, or God forbid something happens between them. Arthur and Ben are both fast asleep. We've got the feed playing in command just to monitor and keep an eye on everything, and suddenly it glitches. Not a drawn-out one, though. Just a quick scramble, then it's back. Arthur and Ben are still there asleep. Now there's a figure standing there in the airlock, though. Like nothing I've ever seen. Long limbs, big hands that almost look like bulldozers, and just a rounded-off nub right at the shoulders. I hit the intercom speaker for the capsule as fast as I could move, screaming at them to wake up. Poor Ben fell straight out of his bunk and onto Arthur underneath him, belly to belly. Now that's something I normally would have paid to see, but right now my heart was racing for the wrong reasons. So they both scramble up and look towards the airlock. That damn thing is still just standing there. I think it was looking at them. Arthur shouts at it, asking what the hell it wants. There's this low garble of noise that happens. Nothing discernible. It could have been interference for all we know. But by God, I saw Ben's face drain of all colour when it happened. Arthur went a bit slack, looking from Ben to the creature. Then as fast as it showed up, it was gone. Poof! Right into, well, guess you can't say thin air, being where it was. Ben sat down on Arthur's bunk and just cried. It took him a good hour to actually calm down. In the meantime, we had no idea what was happening. Finally, he chilled out enough for us to ask him what had happened. He said that thing had looked at him, no eyes or anything, but he knew it was looking at him. It said, She was never meant to live. Now this shook all of us. Almost a month before the mission, Ben and his wife suffered a miscarriage. She had been 6 months along. They were expecting a little baby girl. Then one day the baby was just gone. No heartbeat, no activity. They didn't know what had happened. It tore Ben and his wife apart though. They had a huge fight a week before liftoff because she didn't want him to go. Didn't want to lose another person she loved. I can't imagine what he felt when he heard that damned thing talk. They cut the mission short after that. Everyone was afraid of what may happen to Ben's mental state if anything else happened. They packed up quick and got the hell out of there. Ben drank himself stupid afterwards, ended up driving his car off the interstate going 150 at around 3 in the morning. They barely got anything to bury. Graham wipes a stray tear from her eye. A man is jogging down the street with his dog, coming closer to our house. Graham calls out a greeting to him. He walks up and begins talking, much to my displeasure. Graham is speaking animatedly and leans down to pet the dog. I remind her we're supposed to be distancing just to be safe. Sorry, Jerry. My grandson here is ass. I'll see you some other time. Anyway, that was the end of Apollo 18. Not a whole lot found out, but we were ready to try again. I was just grateful that Arthur made it back in one piece. We were actually engaged, you know. Way back in the day before he went back up on the 19 mission in 74. I was a bit surprised at this. As far as I was told, Graham had never been married, and my grandfather had been killed in a car accident not long after she found out she was pregnant with my mother. We spent a lot of time together during that time. It was lovely. I miss that man. So, Arthur and Jason volunteered to go back on the 19 mission. I think Arthur was determined to get into that structure and see exactly what was going on with it. They had a new recruit along with them as well, Paul Orson. He was a former Green Beret during the Vietnam War. Tough son of a bitch and not one for conversation. They didn't know what they would find though, so they wanted someone with combat training to go up. Everything goes as normal. It's old hat at this point. They land in the same spot for base camp, Arthur and Paul this time. They got there on day 1 and set everything up, then decided to just rest up for a few hours and go straight in. Well, they didn't realize that they needed to find a way in first. Apparently in all this time researching the structure, everyone just assumed there would be a door somewhere. No such luck. Every wall on the outside was smooth, no cracks or seams signaling a door. They searched every damn inch of that thing, nothing to be found. Lo and behold, I'm watching in on Arthur's camera while he's walking around the structure. Even in low gravity, he had 2 left feet. He tripped and fell straight through the wall. We thought we had lost him for a minute. It looked like the camera had hit something and shorted out. Then he asked us if we were seeing it too. The interior of the structure was larger than the exterior, way more room to move about. Lights hung in the air like stars, bathing everything around him in a soft glow. It was like its own miniature galaxy contained in that one building. Probably one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Arthur backed out then, wanting to make sure he could travel freely in and out of the structure before he got trapped there, and it seemed to work fine. It was like there was a portal, a thin veil where it looked like a wall but wasn't. He grabbed Paul, showed him what he had found. Don't think he was too impressed, more like he was ready to shoot it if he could have found a gun. Exploring it further, they found a small spiral slope, almost like a ramp that went downward from the main chamber. They followed it for probably an hour before it got anywhere, seeing more of those strange symbols all over the walls on the way down. When they got to the bottom, it was like some kind of church. No idea what they worshipped or who, but there was an altar right there against the far wall. A statue rose up in a recess behind it. Looked to me like an elongated pyramid of sorts. Not really sure how to describe the geometry of it. There were angles that merged with smaller angles, curves where lines were. It was like my brain was trying to comprehend it through the camera feed but just jumbled everything instead. That was about the time we noticed the spots on the altar. We're not 100% sure to this day what it was, but we had a good enough guess. It was dried, had obviously been there for quite a long time. But it still had that rusty red color that only comes from dried blood. It was splashed all over the place up there, like someone had slit the jugular and waved all about up there. Had to have been gallons spilled. That was enough for the 2 men for that day. They headed back up to base camp, to make record of what they found and go back to sleep. They were out for maybe 2 or 3 hours when it happened again. The camera glitched just like last time, and that thing appeared. It wasn't in the airlock this time, though. It appeared right next to their damn bunks. We tried warning them, but it didn't seem to work. It's like out speakers were jammed. We were only able to watch in terror. That thing leaned over Paul and said something to him in that garbled noise we heard last time. God knows what it was. Then it was gone again. Nothing there. Paul got up and started putting on his suit to go outside then. I kept hitting the button trying to ask what the hell he was doing. Got no response. Our line into the main capsule was dead. When he had the whole suit on, I tried the line going directly to his helmet. I said, "Paul, what the hell did that thing say to you?" You know what he told me? I shook my head in response. He looked straight up into the capsule camera before stepping out and said, "Finishing what they began." I still get chills thinking about that. It was one of the coldest things I've ever heard. By that time, Arthur had woken up and was getting his suit on as fast as he could. God, I begged him not to go after Paul, not to go into that damn church. Whatever was done in there before was bad, and there wasn't going to be anything good coming of it now. He was too good of a man, though. He got everything on and chased Paul in there. No idea how he had moved so fast, but Paul was waiting down there for him already, standing right on the altar and holding an old combat knife. Arthur shouted at him, asking what the hell he thought he was doing. He didn't say a damned word, just started lunging towards Arthur, brandishing that knife. I watched it, all of it. Each of their helmet cameras was on a different side of the big command screen. Our coordinator was shouting at me to tell them to stop, to get their shit together. It wouldn't have done anything. That wasn't Paul in that suit anymore. There was a blind rage in his eyes. His breathing in the mic was like an animal that had been cornered. No, he wanted to kill, and he didn't care who saw. They went back and forth for a while, throwing each other all around that unholy place. Finally, Arthur managed to wrestle the knife away from Paul. He stood up, holding it out in front of him. There were tears in his voice when he was talking, telling Paul to stay away, telling him they could go back home and have a drink, act like all of this never happened. It didn't matter. Paul rushed and Arthur had no choice. He ducked down and thrust the knife upward. The camera in Paul's suit was splattered with red as he depressurized in seconds. Arthur screamed, looking at that altar and throwing the knife at it. He just lay there for a while, sobbing and shouting curses. He was alone up there. Graham's voice cracked. I've tried to transcribe the next part as best as I can, but some parts were difficult to make out. Arthur started pulling Paul's body back up towards the exit with him. Even if he had tried to kill him, he wasn't just going to leave him up there, all alone on a rock. He got to the top and tried to go through the wall back outside, but it was suddenly solid. No give. He tried the other walls, trying to make sure that he wasn't using the wrong one in his emotional state. Nothing. Still no way out. He collapsed against the wall, taking in deep, shallow breaths. His oxygen tank only had about 10 minutes left by his count. The suits weren't designed for long outings back then. I hit the button to talk to him and tried to soothe him. He was almost hysterical, but I like to think hearing me helped him go quietly. I still remember seeing his face in that helmet camera, my last words to him, the little smile that he got right before he passed. He got to know that even though he was dying up here, on a mission completely off the books, there would be part of him still living on right here on Earth. Graham wiped tears away from her eyes. She had been openly sobbing, obviously reliving something painful. I put my hand out for her to take. The last 3 missions they sent up there served 2 purposes. They were recovery missions, to get those bodies back home and give them a proper burial, and demolition missions. They couldn't get back through the wall into the chamber the normal way, so they tried drilling through. There was no chamber though, just solid rock no matter how far they drilled into it. So they gave up after that. The next 2 missions brought explosives and detonated them around the structure, destroying it. We haven't gone back to the moon since then. Not after that loss. Even if we had, I wouldn't have worked the mission. I would have absolutely refused. I told them I wasn't taking on any more crewed landing missions after that. They would have to find another communications head. She stared at me for a moment before looking back out toward the sky. The moon was already hanging there, right at the cusp of night. She let out a long sigh. Some nights I look out at the moon and like to think he's still out there watching over me, watching over us. He would be so proud that I'm finally telling someone this. He'd always talked about having a family and grandchildren one day. I think he's up there right now, giving that sly grin he always had. I'm sure he's proud of you, wherever he is. Gram looked for a moment more as I sat there stunned. Then she got up, gave me a hug, and went back inside to get ready for bed.